Boardroom on. Hello and welcome to episode 115 of the Toadstool Boardroom for the week of November 21st, 2024. My name's Logan Plant, and I'm joined this week, as always, by Justin Korais. Hey, Justin.
What's up, Logan? How are you?
Well, we're a little less extra this week, Justin, because Chris Shriver is not here, but in his stead, we're joined by a very special guest. You know him from the late, great Game Informer, and now from the All Things Nintendo podcast. It's Brian Shea. How you doing, Brian?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for inviting me. Logan, I've had you on my show a couple of times now, and it's so good to kind of flip the tables here and make my way over here.
Yeah, so you can talk about a 5 out of 10 review. No, that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about the Game Awards and the Nintendo nominees that were announced earlier this week. We're going to talk about a very special anniversary near and dear to a few of our hearts here in the boardroom this week. That's 10 years of amiibo. I can't wait to get into that. We're going to talk about Brian's favorite eras of Nintendo, and I'm flipping the tables on him a little bit. He always has a top 5 segment over on his All Things Nintendo podcast, so I asked him to bring one to us here in the boardroom. And we'll get to your listener questions. So let's jump into it. Nintendo nominees at the Game Awards 2024. These nominations went out on Monday, and it's a little bit lighter for Nintendo exclusives than it usually is. And that's kind of just reflective of a little bit of a lighter year critically in terms of new Nintendo games. So the nominees are for Best Action Adventure Game, The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. That game is also in the Best Family Game category, which is one I struggle with. Maybe we can get into that. It's Echoes of Wisdom, Princess Peach Showtime, and Super Mario Party Jamboree. Jamboree is also up in the Best Multiplayer category. And then in the Most Anticipated Game category, we have Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. This is the first time since 2018 Nintendo hasn't had a Game of the Year nominee, and only the second time in the Switch era that that's happened. The other time was 2018, where their biggest game was Smash Ultimate, but that came out the night of the Game Awards. I remember being in line to pick up my copy at a 9 p.m. release here on the West Coast and watching the Joker reveal trailer at the Game Awards lives that happened on my phone. So that was nominated the next year in 2019. And then the only year they've won it is 2017 with Breath of the Wild. So Brian, you're our guest. I'll start with you. How do you feel about kind of the lighter year on the nomination side for Nintendo?
You know, I don't think it's necessarily like too outlandish, right? Like this has been, like you said, a kind of lower key year, which is wild to think because like we've gotten like games starring Mario, games starring Princess Zelda, games starring Princess Peach, and that like just in like a kind of in its own out of context description sounds like an incredible year, but it's all kind of been like these spin-offs or remakes or remasters. Or like in the case of like Super Mario Party Jamboree, it's just a new entry in a very long-running series that never is really going to get nominated for Game of the Year. Or Mario and Luigi Brothership, which, Logan, you were not the biggest fan of and, was fairly divisive. There were some other people who disagreed with kind of the consensus that it was a great game. So like you were not alone on that. So I don't think that was going to get nominated for like a whole lot either. And I just think that that's indicative of this being like we are 8 years deep into this console, basically. And that's just how consoles go. Like, look at the Wii U's last 2 years. Like, I know that was a complete apples and oranges comparison because the Wii U sold just like the Switch basically outsold the Wii U instantly. And the Switch has continued to sell gangbusters. So, of course, they're going to support it for longer. But the Wii U dried up like there was just nothing on the vine whatsoever those last couple of years that it existed. And we know that the Switch is on its way out. We know the Switch 2 is, relatively right around the corner. So we're going to have a lot of the A teams of development switching over to start making games for Switch 2. And that's really what we saw, right? Like it wasn't like the A teams making the games that came out this year. It's kind of like the side development studios, the Acquires and Grezzo's kind of putting out the big games for Nintendo this year. So I think it's perfectly reasonable.
Yeah, I wonder if so much of the discourse surrounding these nominations was the Game of the Year category featuring DLC with Elden Ring's Shadow of the Erdtree expansion, right? That's Nintendo, so we won't really get into that. But I do wonder, had that rule not been in place, was Echoes of Wisdom next up? Was that the one that would have made it in had that rule not been a thing? Because people were decently high on that game, and it appeared in a couple other places, but not there. And I wonder if that was kind of the next one up for Game of the Year. A Zelda game that a lot of people loved. I wasn't as high on as a massive Zelda fan, and I know a lot of others feel the same way, and it's top down. It's not the 3D open world stuff that people love, but I can't help but wonder if that was the one that was next if the DLC rule wasn't in effect this year.
I think it might have been Dragon Age, to be honest.
Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like, that feels like more like Game of the Year caliber, and I know, again, it's divisive, and there's a segment of the gaming population that may have rebelled if it did get that award, but or that nomination. But I think that I feel like Zelda is still a couple more slots behind other big releases from this year. Like, I liked Echoes of Wisdom. I didn't finish it, but like I played a decent amount of it, and I like it. But it's not. I don't even know if it's in my top 10 of this year, to be honest. It might be on the lower end of my top 10.
Yeah, and that's kind of indicting when 2 of the 3 people on this Nintendo podcast haven't finished Zelda yet, and the one that did, I didn't really love it all that much. So, yeah, a little bit of a miss there, like we've talked about. Justin, what do you make of these nominations?
Yeah, I think that, to Brian's point about how, we're seeing a lot of not their A teams in production right now, a lot of their support teams, and even like a little bit of licensing happening with some of their properties. Like, you can see the effects here, and I'll be honest, I want that to be the case. Like, I want all of their best talent and resources to be working on what's coming next. We know that that's just right around the corner, and I want the new shiny things. I want their teams to be like in the mines right now, building this stuff that's coming up. And if the price that we pay is the release slate that we got this year, which, okay, it doesn't have a Mario Odyssey or a Breath of the Wild, but it was a good lineup this year, so I'm fine with it. If it means that they kind of sit out award season for a change, I'll take it. Absolutely, that is totally fine by me. I think that I think a more interesting question, just in general, would be what is Nintendo's best game of the year? Because they had a number of good games. Was it a remake of an old Paper Mario game? Was it this bold new take on like top-down Zelda? I don't know. And to me, honestly, that's a harder question. It might honestly have been Mario Party, and it's hard to say that a party game can be their best release of the year. So it's a weird, fascinating year for them. But I honestly don't have a problem with it. And like, furthermore, I also don't feel like they're particularly snubbed. There's nothing that didn't make the cut here that I think I would push for.
Yeah, and I just looked up at I keep a running tab of like my favorite games of the year, and like, it's always subject to change, and I'll rearrange it like probably 25 times between now and the end of the year. But like, I don't have a single Nintendo developed game on my top 10.
Wow,
like the only game that I think is in my top 5 that is on the Switch at all is Balatro.
Mm-hmm. Which did get a Game of the Year nomination, which is
deservingly
very
so.
Exciting. Yes. Yeah, I couldn't, to speak on that for a second, I couldn't stand that people are saying a card game can't be nominated for Game of the Year. Why? Why does a game have to cost hundreds of millions of dollars to develop to be considered? That's just a silly take, in my opinion. But no, I didn't pick this topic at all because I thought Nintendo was snubbed. I think they just didn't have that top shelf Game of the Year quality game this year. Super Mario Party Jamboree might be my personal front runner for the Game of the Year right now, but I know it's never going to get the industry-wide push behind it, right? It's just not that kind of game that people go for. It's a party game, and it's in a series that a lot of people, frankly, don't even like that much. Mario Party infuriates a lot of people, but it's my favorite Nintendo thing of the year. And then you mentioned the other one, Justin, that I love, Paper Mario. But in a year stacked with RPGs, a very faithful remake of a 20-year-old GameCube RPG, that it's not like a Final Fantasy VII Rebirth that totally changes it up. This is a very straight remake. It's just not going to move the needle very much, but that game's amazing. I think in a lighter year, there's a chance Thousand Year Door shows up in the RPG category, but it didn't show up here at all. And I think that's just because, one, not a lot of people played it, and two, I think there was a lot of confusion over, is this even a remake, or is it a remaster, or is it an enhanced port? I don't think a lot of people knew just because of how very similar it was to its GameCube original. So no, I don't think that
words have ever been that clearly defined in the industry anyway.
No, it's a disaster to try
and to your point, Logan, like, there are much more well-established genres than party games that will probably never receive like a Game of the Year nomination. Like even look at like last year. I think Street Fighter 6 is one of the best entries, if not the best entry, in one of the most iconic video game franchises to ever exist. And nobody was like, what? They weren't nominated for a Game of the Year? What? Like they're snubbed? And it's like, no, everybody just accepted that like fighting games are not going to ever get that Game of the Year unless it's like something that completely transcends like Smash Ultimate, that like it's a fighting game, but it's also like all this other like spectacle event type release as well. So it takes something like that for a fighting game to really break through. But like, yeah, nobody was like questioning the Game Awards like validity because Street Fighter 6 wasn't nominated, and they just accepted like, hey, it's a fighting game. It's a massive uphill battle for anything from that genre to make a mainstream splash.
Same goes for sports games.
Horizon 5.
The highest review score I've given in the last 3 years is for an MLB The Show game from a couple years ago when they debuted their Negro League storyline. Like,
yeah.
But you just know, as amazing as this is, just because it's a annual sports franchise, it kind of doesn't matter how good it is because it's not something that is seriously considered for something like that.
And Logan speaking my language, saying Forza Horizon 5, that was my Game of the Year when it came out. Yeah. And I was just like, I accepted it was never going to be like Game Informer's Game of the Year, but I argued to get it on that top 10 and I was successful.
Yeah, that won IGN's Game of the Year back in 2021. That game just took over, and it did end up winning, really and then it wasn't even nominated at the Game Awards for that category. And that's something interesting. I think that you see a lot of people kind of say, oh, Jeff Keighley just picks the games that he wants. And no, that's not how this works. There's detailed explanation of how this stuff works on the Game Awards website. It's a panel of dozens and dozens of jurors, which range from content creators to entire organizations that get to vote on this. IGN is among them, and we organize and kind of internally work out our ballot that we send off to the Game Awards that factors into this nominations. And so it's a system, but then it ends up kind of flawed because it all boils down to what were the 6 games that everybody in the industry had to play this year to make guides for or to make content about. Yeah. And so I struggle with it a little bit because something like Balatro cracking through, that was awesome to see because it had a moment in this industry this year and it's getting its flowers now on the biggest award show stage. So that's very cool. But then the other stuff is just, this was the most popular AAA stuff this year. And Justin, I know you have some thoughts about how TGA's all goes.
Yeah, and like I don't want to be a downer about those things. I think that if you make a game and it's nominated for an award, if you're a creator that gets recognized, you should have nothing but unabashed joy and enthusiasm for that. That's a great thing. You should take your victory lap and enjoy your flowers. But like there are some issues with it, and some of it has to do with the way that winners and nominees are selected. I think you summed it up perfectly, why it tends to push everything towards the zeitgeist, which isn't necessarily the best way to evaluate art. And I'm firmly planting my flag in the video games art camp. And on like kind of further, the like event itself, it is so heavily commercialized, and it's such a shame to me when it is at its best hopefully meant to be this moment for the industry to stop and celebrate, and we have people receiving awards being ushered off of the stage quickly, like in middle of speeches, so that we can run 8,000 more trailers, and big companies with a lot of money are basically will be asked to send trailers to it. Small companies will often be charged through the nose to get the exposure and do things like that. And so there's an like, I'm not anti-capitalist or anything like that, but there certainly is a level of commercialization to it that I think stands in the way of some of the celebration. When I think that a lot of the event is about that, and it's about the trailers, and there's so many more award categories that we hear about and we talk about, and those people deserve their recognition and their flowers too. And so I struggle with the way it doesn't do an amazing job serving those people and those things. And so, but between that and the fact that it's really difficult for something to break through if it doesn't become like the game that all the creators are playing so that they can speak on and cast votes for it. Yeah, it bothers me. It's that's really the source of my chief cynicism behind it all.
But Brian, what's your take on the Game Awards as a whole?
I overall like them, and I think that the biggest thing is you have to kind of go in knowing what it is, right? Like having. I was looking at the numbers yesterday when the press release came through, or whenever that was, 2 days ago, and I was reading up. They were 5 million viewers shy of the Super Bowl in terms of viewership. If you compare that to like the GDC Awards or the DICE Awards, that explains why there are so many trailers. People aren't tuning in to see the award winners primarily. Like, yeah, it's nice to see those award winners, but they're tuning in for that booming voice that says world premiere. They want to see all the announcements. So I don't mind that it's flooded with trailers. That said, there are definite times where it's like, I would like it to be like a little bit more reverent towards the winners. Like don't give them Christopher Judge rambling for like 8 minutes. I know it's a 3-hour long show. We don't need this show to be any longer, but like give them a little bit more time. And I think Jeff may have learned his lesson last year, because if you recall, he cheated himself out of his own world premiere by ushering the Baldur's Gate 3 director off, because his plan was to get up on that stage and announce, oh, the Xbox version is available now. Go download it. And because he got played off, he didn't get a chance to announce that. So Jeff almost got a new platform announced for the game that just won Game of the Year on his show for free. And because he cut the production staff cut off the director, he didn't get that announcement. So I think that there is a better balance to be struck. And it was also, I got to travel to Osaka and spend a few days with the Street Fighter 6 developers for the Game Informer cover story. And it was great to see them travel all the way from Osaka to LA to attend the Game Awards and win Best Fighting Game. But they weren't even like brought up on stage, right? So it was like, man, that sucks. Like, I'm happy for you guys. I'm glad you won. It was well deserved. But it sucks that like you guys weren't even like able to go up on stage and accept your award. So there is a better balance to be struck, but I think that if they got rid of like a lot of the trailers or most of the trailers, I think that number would plummet. And also, like Justin pointed out, that is a main source of revenue for Jeff Keighley and the show, is the developers that do pay for their maybe lower profile games to be featured on the show. And that is something that he has actually resisted, is going on a network TV, because he's gotten offers to come on, like get a TV deal and like broadcast it on broadcast television. He's wanted to keep it streaming first, and he's wanted to keep it independent and maintain creative control. And I think if that's the way that he does that, then I'd rather have that than some like overly corporatized, by a TV network that's not endemic and not in the games industry. I would much rather have somebody like Jeff, who at least has an authentic love and knowledge for the industry.
Yeah, and you bringing up the viewership numbers that is the driving point, right? We complain we're not actually celebrating the games, we're not actually celebrating the creators. The DICE Awards do that. We don't talk about that as much on this show. When the DICE Awards happen, we'll do a recap the next week if a bunch of Nintendo stuff won, but if not, it kind of comes and goes for much of the industry. So that is really why this exists. I think one of my main problems with the Game Awards just stems from there's 3 Keighley shows a year, and they all take place in the same 6 months, and they're all 3 hours long. You have opening night live at Gamescom, you have SGF in June, and then you have the Game Awards in December, and it's just a lot of these shows that tend to bleed together. And that's not the Game Awards' fault. I think that's mostly Gamescom opening night live's fault. I think that is the one you could cut from the schedule and really be okay. Not much ever really happens at that one. And just for my job, I have to watch and cover all 3. So it gets a little tiresome for me. But other than that, I don't know. Yeah, there's some issues with the awards. I think some of the genres are weird. Astrobot's a platformer, not an action adventure, but there's not enough platformers to have a platformer award. Yeah. There should be more platformers, so that which is just an entirely separate problem. But yeah, and then last year, the thing that just irked me the most was Eiji Aonuma getting 30 seconds on stage to talk about Tears of the Kingdom and then getting played off. And that is just, you have one of the most legendary creators in this industry who flew across the world. Like Brian was saying about the Street Fighter 6 creators, just isn't Best Fighting Game one of those ones they just announced in the pre-show in that huge rapid fire shotgun of 6 awards
8 categories with winners.
I think it was like one of the on the side stage during the main show, but like it was just like Jeff being up there. All right, we're gonna read off like 3 awards categories and then like just rapid fire them.
Pick up your trophy on your way out.
Yeah, that's
basically.
just a bummer. And I have to wonder if that bugged Nintendo. I'm not inside. I don't know how they feel, but them sending this guy, one of their legends, one of their all-timers, to fly across the world to be at this thing, and then getting 20 to 30 seconds on stage, and then they didn't win Game of the Year, so they didn't get to go back up. And it's just that's I don't think that's very respectful of their time or effort to be there for this thing. And you're trying to pack the room with these legends, and then you treat them that way. That just rubs me the wrong way, and just really shows.
He'll never do it. He'll never do it to Hideo Kojima.
No.
Yeah, no.
As much time as he wants.
All the time in the world. Yeah.
He would get 5 minutes to announce what he had for breakfast if he wanted it.
Yeah. Yes.
But no,
Yeah.
I do overall like the Game Awards. But yes, like Justin, I do have my criticisms, and I do think that it would be nice to, like, even if they just extended it to a full minute or whatever, like, give us a little bit more time to allow these developers, to bask a little bit in what just happened to them. They got an award from, whether it's the most prestigious or not, it's the biggest, inarguably, award show in the entire games industry, and they just won an award. So, like, it would be nice if they could, fully allow the moment to sink in, get their flowers, and get a little bit more screen time while they're in the theater.
Can I tell you what I think is undoubtedly the coolest part of the entire program? It's when they get to the Game of the Year and they do the medley.
It's so good.
From all of them. Oh, it gets me every time.
Yes. Yeah, last year with the Tears of the Kingdom insert in there, it's amazing. And that game still should have won. I'll still say it. That game still should have won Game of the Year, 2020.
It was mine.
Yeah, same. Yeah. Last thing before we move on here. Do we think Nintendo is going to reveal anything at this event? They've had kind of a back and forth history of showing stuff at the Game Awards. They've had multiple Smash reveals there. I mentioned Joker. They had the big Sephiroth trailer in 2020. They've revealed things like Bravely Default 2, which they published. They didn't develop. Same with Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 was a Nintendo published Game Awards reveal. But then it's been a little bit quieter recently. Brian, do you expect anything to show up here?
I don't. And it's because Nintendo has been in such a holding pattern ever since. I mean, we might get a new trailer for something that's already announced, like Donkey Kong Country Returns HD or something, but like, it's not going to be like, oh my God, we're announcing the next Mario game. I don't think. I think that they're going to hold that for the Switch 2, like, Nintendo Direct that they're going to do. And also, like, a lot of the big announcements were as a result of the fact that Jeff Keighley and Reggie have such a great relationship. Mm-hmm. And ever since Reggie left, the Game Awards have kind of, been deprioritized by Nintendo.
Yeah, you can see that clear divide. That's great to point out. Justin, how about you?
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement. I think that, Nintendo, I don't expect Nintendo to announce anything. I also think that it'll be a combination of the fact that, like, they don't have total control over how much time they have for their announcements. When they do their Nintendo Directs, they have total control over all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. They also, and this is not a shot at the Game Awards, but, like, they don't need it. Like, they don't need the spotlight of being there where everybody's watching. When they have a Direct, everybody will watch. So I don't think there's a lot of benefit to them for that. I don't know what it has to offer them, especially, like, if this was a year where they had a ton of things in a ton of categories and they were all coming over to, like, sit in and potentially win awards, like, then it might make sense just because they're kind of already there. But, like, otherwise, no, I would be shocked if we saw, like, any kind of announcement.
Could you imagine if they did an Xbox and just, like, reveal their next console, like Xbox did with the Series X? Like, that would be a curveball.
Or if they went full Sega Saturn, they're like, and it's available now.
Oh my God.
Get your orders in. I still can't believe we saw the Series X at the Game Awards. That was wild that they just kind of slipped that in there. That was crazy. Yeah, no, I'm totally with you guys. I kind of expected those answers. All that to say, not that anyone listening to the show is in that audience, but just don't hype this up as the next big Switch 2 checkpoint. It's not one of them. It's just really not going to be. So, no, there could be something small there, but I don't really expect anything there, especially in a year where they're not up for something big, like a Game of the Year. Like the year that Breath of the Wild wins, they have the DLC trailer with Link on the motorcycle. And that's a nice tie-in because this whole night is about Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey, and hey, here's this new thing. But it was just a quiet year, and I expect it to finish quiet as well. That's the Game Awards nominations for Nintendo in 2024. Let's look back to 2014 now, though, because it's been 10 years since the launch of Super Smash Bros. For Wii U, and with it, the start of the amiibo line, which you all know. You can see them all behind me if you're watching the video version. I got over 100 on that shelf back there behind me. Big amiibo fan. And Brian, we were talking a bit before the show, and you said that you're a big amiibo guy as well.
Yeah, so I remember when the amiibos were first announced, and I thought they were the stupidest thing that's ever existed. I was like, well, if I'm gonna get like a Mario or Zelda or Link or whatever figure, I'm just gonna get like a nice figure of them. Mm-hmm. I don't need like the in-game bonuses or anything. And then I was reviewing Smash for Wii U, and Nintendo sent me a copy of that. They sent me a GameCube controller with the adapter, and they sent me the Mario amiibo. This was a pre-launch Mario amiibo that they sent to me. And I was like, okay, whatever. It's nice to have a little like Mario figure, whatever. Like I'm not going to like throw it out or anything. I like having a Mario figure whenever I can. I have a ton of them right off screen right here. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, oh, well, let me get like the characters I really care about. So I got like the Link and like Donkey Kong and and then I was like, well, I cut my teeth on like the NES games, so I got like I wanted to get Mario, Luigi, Peach, and Toad because that was like the original 4. And then I was like, all right, I think I'm good. And then they started releasing like the Pokemon ones, and they started releasing, and I got all the Zelda ones because, of course, like I literally have an entire top of my shelf here full of every single Zelda amiibo, and then I have 2 other tower like cubes full of amiibos from other, and it's gotten out of control. They don't really release that many anymore, but like for a while it was like, fine, I guess I'll get the Cloud amiibo, like whatever, or like, oh, I love Street Fighter, so I guess I'll get the Ryu and Ken amiibos, and then Sephiroth, oh, I gotta get that. They did such a good job of like making me give a crap about them, even though I very much didn't want to. And it all started because they sent me one so I could review Smash for Wii U. And then like that turned out to be a wise investment on their part because I gave them hundreds of dollars after that.
Yeah, they're like, first one's on us.
Yep.
It really was.
Like it. Yeah. No, you just described the exact same scenario so many of us went through. 10 years ago right now, I did the exact same thing. I started with the Mario one and thought, oh, this is a cool figure to have. I love Smash Brothers. It's one of my favorite series of all time, up there with Zelda. And it was just perfect. And I know I've told this on the show before, but one more time for the 10th anniversary here. Just being a kid and playing Super Smash Brothers Melee and that Mario trophy coming to life. And then them doing that in real life 13 years later for Smash 4 was just the biggest stroke of genius one of the biggest strokes of genius they've ever had. It was the perfect game to launch this with. If they just launched this with the Mario Party line that came out 6 months later or so, I don't know if I would have cared. It's the idea of it being the Smash Brothers trophy in those poses from that game, launching alongside that game, that just, it was lightning in a bottle. It struck at the exact right moment, and just completing that Smash Brothers collection was just such a drive. And then, of course, listening to like Nintendo voice chat at the time and hearing those guys lose their minds over it and getting roped into that community too and being a part of all that. It was a blast, and I miss it. And about 5 years in, it did kind of just become an automatic swipe the card checklist thing because they weren't hard to find anymore. And it was just, it's an amiibo day. I guess I'll pick up the Banjo-Kazooie and the Terry that came out on the same day, whatever. And it wasn't as exciting anymore. But that first year or so when I was on Reddit threads, people were tracking truck shipments, figuring out when things were getting in. There was a strike at the docks in San Francisco, and people say, oh, that's going to delay the Wave 3 amiibo shipments. It was pandemonium, bigger than like a console launch. It was insane that the smaller amount of people going after these things were just so fervent about getting them, and it was a blast to be a part of. And shout out to Amiibo News, which became Nintendo Wire, which launched this whole thing because of Amiibo, and that's where I got my first byline, was nintendowire.com in 2016. And
wow,
it wouldn't exist without Amiibo, and that's just like, it's a really cool part of kind of my media journey, is because of these little damn plastic things that Nintendo put out.
So did you ever get into any of the other Toys to Life lines, like Skylanders or Disney Infinity?
No, I didn't, and I'm like you, Brian. I thought they were so stupid. I was like, I don't need these. I don't need to get a random dragon monster that's nothing from Skylanders. And I have a distinct memory of being in my neighbor's basement, and their daughter had a ton of Skylanders, and I'm just sitting there looking at the shelf like, oh, I would never want to collect these things. I would never want to play a game where these were a mandatory thing, and all you have to do is slap Mario on that plastic base, and that's all it takes to get me. How about you?
I'll tell you that I wasn't into Skylanders and Disney Infinity. I was like, okay, well, I like a lot of like Disney properties, but like I don't want to collect a bunch of toys of them. And then when Disney Infinity went under and I could get all of like the Star Wars and Marvel characters on clearance, I was like paying like $2 for like Iron Man, and I was like, okay, now I will buy them. And I think I dropped like maybe $25, and I got like most of the Avengers and like most of the mainline like Star Wars characters. And I was like, okay, that's a fair trade. I would never have paid like the what was like $12 or $13 a pop. No, that was way too much.
Justin, how about you? Where were you 10 years ago when the first Amiibo came out?
I was not buying Amiibo, I'll tell you that. Yeah, okay. I'm somebody who kind of tries not to collect a lot of stuff. Like, I've had a lot of stuff, I've had to deal with a lot of stuff. So I avoid having stuff. We've talked about this on the show before, too. Like, I actually prefer to collect my media digitally, so I don't have to take up shelf space. I don't have to consume plastics and things like that. And so, when a lot of those toy-to-life things came up, I largely abstained. That includes Amiibo. And it is interesting, though, if you look back, because the Amiibo debuted kind of like in the latter half of that toys-to-life craze, and a lot of people expected Nintendo to do something, but just like they always did, but they didn't do it the same way as everybody else, right? Like Skylanders had Skylanders games, right? Disney Infinity had games, and there were sequels and things like that. But the Amiibo, like there wasn't an Amiibo game. And I think that was a stroke of genius, because it meant that like they didn't have to keep supporting one specific piece of software in order for these things to be valid or interesting or useful. They're really cool figurines of iconic characters, so people will display them anyway. Nintendo was also really smart about their release cadence and how they set up collections and things like that to keep people coming back. And like, you can use them. You can you can go to the store, buy an Amiibo today, and use it in a piece of software today. And it's just an example of Nintendo kind of like looking through the noise and sort of seeing a slightly different path that like eventually proves to be brilliant when the whole industry like sort of collapses. So I do have a couple of Amiibo. I have Wolf Link. I have I've got the really big Breath of the Wild one of the Guardian.
The Guardian?
So, oh, yeah, same.
Yeah. So I've got a couple, but, like, that's it. And again, that's because I'm just such a big Zelda fan. I couldn't not get at least some. But that's it. Like, that is all I've got, and that's all I intend to have. That being said, I have been eyeballing some of the, like, really high-quality, like, Link and Zelda figurines that have been showing up on the internet. So I'm kind of tempted with some of those.
Yeah, there's like that new Figma of Tears of the Kingdom Link where
oh god,
you can detach his top half and put it in like an ascend puddle and put it on your desk. Very, very tempting.
Yeah, so that was got me sweating a little bit.
I love the Figmas and like the Nendoroids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't have any of them. I have none of the Nendoroids. That would be my first one. But I have to ask you, Brian, what's your favorite Amiibo? What's the one that catches your eye more than most?
It's probably a Zelda one. Let me see if there's one.
Yeah, Peace Stand Link running down the leg.
It might be the Breath of the Wild Guardian, just because it's so unique and cool, and like I didn't expect them to do it.
It is a massive Amiibo.
Yeah. I do like the classic, like the Pixel Link.
That's pretty cool.
See, yeah, that's very cool. He's reaching for him.
Yeah,
that's a classic. 8-bit Link is great.
I have both of the 8-bit Marios, the original color scheme and the modern color scheme. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I love all of the. I like the Tears of the Kingdom Ganondorf is really cool.
Yeah.
Wolf Link.
The only Zelda series Ganondorf amiibo there is. It took him till the very end to finally get that done, which was crazy.
Don't they have the? I mean, well, I guess it's Smash Brothers Ganondorf technically, but that's basically Twilight Princess Ganondorf.
Yeah, but just with that, I have them separated on my shelf behind me, like Smash series and then Zelda series, and there was just no Ganon for so long, and it always drove me nuts until they finally added the Tears of the Kingdom.
What's one that you would want? Like, what's an amiibo that doesn't exist that you would want them to make? I did very early on. One of my first articles I ever did for Game Informer was I did like, hey, here are the 10 amiibos I would most want. And I photoshopped like the character models onto amiibo stands in like poses. Like it was a very intricate thing that did very minimal return.
Well, before you get into what was on that list, actually from Red Tea House in our Discord asked us that exact question. He says, is there a game you wish had amiibo support but never got it? This can be tackled from the angle of games that could have used pre-existing amiibo or games that have gotten their own line but didn't, and anything in between. And Red Tea House says, personally, I wish ARMS got a line that functioned like Smash mixed with Splatoon so I could save loadouts and train a fighter. Would have been fun and would have allowed that strong, colorful cast to grace my desk shelf. Yeah, the Min Min Smash Brothers amiibo is a really good one and did make me think that ARMS characters deserved maybe a line at some point. But Brian, what was on that list at the time?
I mean, it was like, I can only remember a couple of them, but like I wanted like more characters from like Sonic. I wanted like a Knuckles amiibo really bad. I thought that would have been cool.
Yeah.
God, I mean, I'm sure several of them. I remember one of them in particular was still to this day, my most wanted, which is Wind Waker Ganondorf.
Oh, yes, that. They just... Because they made that special edition, Wind Waker HD, the year before Amiibo came out. That would have been perfect to do an Amiibo of instead.
Would it come with a sword just planted right there?
Yeah, there's two versions. There's stone version and
Swap out
non-stone
the-
version. Yeah.
But yeah, I think a lot of them had gotten amiibos by the time like amiibo production really started slowing down. But yeah, there were several games that I was just like, oh man, that'd be so cool if we get like, you know, this character or this or whatever. And I remember, let me see if there's like another one that I can think of that, like, yeah, I mean, I think Splatoon was like one of them that I wanted, and then eventually it did come
like
out.
25 of them. Yeah,
there's
there's
too
so
many.
many now. Yeah. Justin, how about you? What's a character or a game that you wish had gotten Amiibo support?
I'm going to give you two, and they might be terrible ideas, but you're going to get them anyway. One is, if it's going to be Nintendo, it means that also means it was in Smash. So I would adore to have a little Master Chief amiibo, especially if it meant that he was in Smash. That would be so much fun. He would look so cool on the little stand with some kind of pose, maybe a plasma grenade in his hand, or doing the Halo 2 pose with the two like SMGs.
Yeah.
I would love that. And the other one, and like I know that this is kind of a weird can of worms, and like I don't think it would necessarily need to be a trend, but like I always thought, you know, because like, you know, things can be represented in Mii's and things like that. I would have loved a little like Reggie and Iwata dual set of amiibo. I think that would have just been so cute. Just like a little like side by side high fiving like friendship set with them would be like it would be cute and would look great on my shelf. I would buy it.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, is because they were the two that fought in that initial Amiibo reveal video at E3 2014, and that just Mii's of them would have been brilliant. And then an extension off that, a My Nintendo reward that costs some obscene number of coins to redeem, but to make your own Mii into a custom amiibo. That is a slam dunk that never happened. That would have been the coolest, probably expensive. I would have even paid for it on top of the reward points, but that is something that I think would have been a big, big winner if you could have done that.
You know what? I did remember one more that I put on my most wanted list, and that was just an R-Wing from Star Fox. And we ultimately got it with the Starlink game from
I was going to say, so you had to buy that one game.
So I was a little prescient with that one.
Yeah, nice. Well, mine's very similar to that. One of mine is obviously a Blue Falcon from F-Zero. Would have ruled.
yeah.
That would have been very, very cool. And then we've said this so many times the last few weeks, but it's just crazy that Zelda from Echoes of Wisdom didn't get one, and then some other characters from Zelda like Pen or Cass from Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, beloved characters that are pretty important. We got the champions from Breath of the Wild, but never really anything beyond that in that world. And then Elephant Mario just never got anything. I just feel like the last year has really been lacking.
Yeah, Elephant Mario seems like a slam dunk.
Yeah, totally.
But other than that, most games got them. I think that Pikmin, there was maybe some left on the table that they could have gone with, because we never really got a bespoke Pikmin line, just kind of the one-off of the Pikmin all around the rock. It could have been cool to kind of blow that up a little bit more, but maybe they just thought no one would buy them, and they'd end up in the bargain bin like all those Disney Infinity ones you got.
I would love a classic line where it's like, we're going to do a Mario 64 line, and the character models are actually like the N64 graphics. Like almost how you could get like the Mario 64 skin in Mario Odyssey. Like, give us like that Mario, give us that Bowser. Like, that
Give
would
me an
be
Excite
so
Bite
sick.
Cowards.
But like, also like, yeah, then you could also have an excuse to go back and do like Ocarina of Time Ganondorf or Ocarina of Time Zelda or Sheik.
Yeah.
Or you already have Sheik. Never mind.
Yeah, or the
We got
full
Ocarina
mask
of Time sheet.
transformations from Majora's Mask, Deku Link, and Zora Link,
yeah.
and things like that
Like that
didn't
was-
happen.
That was another one that I had on the list. Now we're jogging the memory here with Skull Kid.
Yes, again, another guy who got the special edition statue with Majora's Mask 3D, but not the amiibo, which was just a strange choice because amiibo existed and were very much a thing at that point, and they just didn't do it at the time. But other part of this question is, do you think amiibo will continue into the next console? And I'm so torn on this, and Brian, I want to hear from you.
I don't think it's. I mean, because we saw such a drop off over the course of the Switch's lifespan, but I don't think it's going to be like a prominent feature that they're going to be like surfacing as like this is one of the main functionalities, the way they kind of did near the tail end of the Wii U and like the beginning of the Switch. But I think it will still have like the reader on the Joy-Cons and the Pro controllers and everything, and I think that they will continue to add little bonuses. I mean, we just got a bunch of them with Tears of the Kingdom last year, so it would make sense that they would continue to be like, oh, well, if you have this Link amiibo, you can scan it and get some cool bonuses in whatever the next Zelda game is. Or if Mario Kart 9 comes out, you can like get your little amiibo costumes or whatever. I think that it will continue on in that capacity, but I don't think they're going to like ramp back up and be like, we're putting out 25 amiibos this year. But I think that it does have a place on Nintendo's virtual shelf.
They keep reprinting old ones. They are restocking ones that they made in 2018 or 2015 that are back on store shelves. And if you dig into Nintendo's financial reports, they still make money off this. This is still a good investment for them that they make a pretty big return on. But then they'll go 8 months without announcing any new amiibo, and they won't put amiibo support in their biggest games. And then they say, oh, there's this Splatoon 3 event that's not even DLC, it's just a free event. Here's 4 new amiibo for that, just out of nowhere. It's become really unpredictable. But Justin, do you think it's going to continue?
No, I don't. I think that there will be an NFC reader in the next console because of backwards compatibility and things like that. But I think eventually, if you shackle yourself to things that you've done in previous generations, that becomes an issue. And that's something that Nintendo doesn't do. They just don't. It's also, if you look at them over their history, it's really their culture. Like they will happily make a very finite number of something. Like they would rather make 1,000 of something and then sell 1,000 of it than they would make 2,000 of it and sell 1,500 of it. You know what I mean? Like they don't want to make any more than they need to. Like there's a reason why we're not still finding a bunch of cardboard on store shelves that we strap to our faces and things like that. It's very much I think it's a finite project with a finite scope. I think it was so successful, its scope grew and they did more with it. Like I was at the Nintendo store in Tokyo, they had a huge amiibo section. And yeah, that stuff does make money, but also at a certain point, just from a business standpoint, you start thinking about, could we do something else that is more successful than that? Like, yeah, it's turning a profit, but is there something more impactful we could do, or something that is more in line with our strategies? And we've talked a lot about some of their shifting strategies for the next generations as well. So I think that they would rather dedicate the time, resources, and thought power to something that's more forward-looking to where they want to go, rather than continuing to maintain this cool project that lasted, I think, a lot longer than anybody expected.
Yeah. I just want to know who at Nintendo runs amiibo up the flagpole. Who is it that says, we got to make 4 more Splatoon Idol amiibo for this Splatoon 3 event? Is it because they know that Splatoon ones always sell out and they sell really well because those fans collect everything? Or is there someone on the Splatoon team that's super passionate about it and goes through all the bureaucracy that's probably required to get these things greenlit? We just don't know. And why didn't they do that for Zelda? Because the Zelda set, by all measures, sells very well too. So yeah, I think that there will be a reader. I'm with you guys both on that. I think that's just part of their seamless backwards compatibility that's going to happen. Too many games use it to just throw it out. And then, I don't know, they could always release the hockey puck again like they did for the original 3DS that didn't have the scanner. But I think it'll just be built into the controller. And I don't know. I'm gonna say I think it will continue. I think if there's a Splatoon 4, which there will be amiibo for that. I think they'll still roll it out for big releases like that they've traditionally done. So, but we're definitely past the lion's share of them. This era, 10 years it's coming to a close, but it's been a ton of fun. Write in with your favorite amiibo, toadstoolboardroom@gmail.com, or drop it into our episode discussion channel in the Toadstool Boardroom Discord. But we're going to move on though, because we're already starting to run close to time here, and we got to hear Brian's top 5 for the week, which is his favorite eras of Nintendo. When I was over on All Things Nintendo, which you should go check out, Brian told a story about covering Nintendo during the Wii era with a very specific Skyward Sword presentation that happened on stage at E3, and it just got me wondering, kind of, what are your favorite eras of Nintendo, both to cover, because you've been in the industry for a long time, and just as a fan. So if you put that all into one conglomerate list for us, I'd love to hear it.
Sure. My list might be a little controversial.
Okay.
If we're just going top 5, number 5, I think that this might shock some of the maybe younger viewers or younger listeners of this show. It's the GameCube and Game Boy Advance era. And I like it, but in the moment, I actually didn't like GameCube. Mm-hmm. Most of my love for GameCube has been in retrospect. Like like Luigi's Mansion was really never like my favorite spin-off franchise. I never have really taken to Mario Sunshine. I bounced off Wind Waker when I was a kid, and I've gone back and played through the HD version on Wii U and absolutely adored it. But like, it wasn't really my favorite console. Like a lot of stuff that came out on GameCube, I either bounced off or I never tried in the moment. I've only experienced it through going back to it in adulthood. And then, of course, I do have the appreciation for things like Double Dash or Metroid Prime. But a lot of the heavy lifting in this era for me was on Game Boy Advance. And even then, as much as I love the Game Boy Advance, it's such a strange handheld for me because we never got like an actual true Mario game for it. Like it was just like these 4 remakes that we got, even though the Mario 3 remake is fantastic and has all these extra levels that don't exist on any other platform, which is why it's worthwhile to go check that out on Nintendo Switch Online if you have the expansion pack, because there are all those e-reader levels that you can play on Mario 3 that are just like basically a free expansion now that it's included with the Switch Online version. To Super Mario Brothers 3, one of the greatest platformers of all time. So yeah, go check that out for sure. But yeah, there's a lot of great remakes and everything, like Metroid Zero Mission, Pokemon Fire Red, Leaf Green. Those are phenomenal games on the Game Boy Advance that, like, you know, made huge improvements over the original versions. And of course, there's like a pretty solid suite of just original games on the Game Boy Advance as well. But that wasn't enough to make it push it above my other eras here. Number 4, I think, is going to be my most controversial pick. The Wii U and 3DS era.
Oh, I love that. Not controversial to me at all.
Wow.
I love
it. I acknowledge that the Wii U was the half step that ultimately just gave us the full step of the Switch. And I acknowledge that it sometimes feels like a Fisher-Price toy when you're holding the gamepad. And, like, you know, it doesn't have multi-touch on the screen or anything like that. But the game library of that, we're seeing this pan out because of the Switch library. The game library of the Wii U is vastly underrated because so few people owned a Wii U. And then you combine that with the 3DS, which has one of, if not the best top-down Zelda games of all time, with The Link Between Worlds, not to mention a remake of, to that point, my favorite game of all time in Ocarina of Time. And it's a phenomenal remake. I wish they would just find some way to port that to like a home console at this point, because I'm not charging my 3DS. I'm not doing that. But yeah, I mean, I think the Wii U and 3DS, they gave us a lot of stuff that really set the table for the Switch's success, and like all the success that Nintendo has experienced over the past 8 years is largely thanks to the era before it setting the table.
Yeah, I love the 3DS. I'm with you on. I just played Ocarina of Time 3D a couple weeks ago. And that is such a perfect remake. It's amazing how good that remake is, and everything it fixes, with the iron boots being an item instead of gear you have to swap out, and just the text being way faster to click through instead of the typewriter speed of it on N64. Just they did, it's a perfect remake. Everything you could ask for in that game is fixed, and it's just amazing. It's Ocarina of Time 3D specifically is one of the best Nintendo games of all time.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Which brings me to number 3, which is the current era that we are in, the Switch era. And that is because, like, look at the library on the Switch. Like, that's all you really need to do is just... we have the best version of so many of Nintendo's franchises on the Switch. Like, I think Mario Odyssey is my favorite 3D Mario game. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are... Breath of the Wild is my favorite game of all time. Tears of the Kingdom is probably in my top 5. I mean, it's easily in my top 5 Zelda games of all time. And then, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, the best Mario Kart game. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, the best Smash game. And, so many of these flagship franchises have their best entry on the Switch. And there's a reason that it has lasted 8 years, because it's selling like gangbusters. And not only that, but this is the era that Nintendo started branching out in all of these fun, non-gaming ways. We got the Super Mario Brothers movie. We got Super Nintendo World. And all of those were such special experiences for me, both personally and professionally. I got to go to Super Nintendo World in Osaka and Universal Studios in Hollywood. And then I also got to go to the premiere of the Super Mario Brothers movie. And that was the week that I got to interview Chris Pratt, Charlie Day, Seth Rogen, Shigeru Miyamoto, and Koji Kondo. So it's like, that it's just, it was a good week. So yeah, it's just like one of those. I mean, the Switch era is probably Nintendo's favorite era of its existence right now because of how successful they've been. And I even asked Shigeru Miyamoto like what it's like to be at Nintendo in like this era, this boom era that has existed. And he was just like, we continue innovating and we continue like pushing forward, and sometimes it works and sometimes it really works, and sometimes maybe it doesn't work as well. And this just happens to be one of those eras that it has really been able to fire on all cylinders, from whether you're talking like the Super Nintendo World, Super Mario Brothers movie, or the Lego line that they put out, or just the Switch in general. Like, they've really knocked it out of the park. And the final thing I'll say on the Switch, because I know I'm rambling a lot, the biggest, most underrated thing that Nintendo did for this era, it wasn't the hybrid console, which I adore it that it's a hybrid console. It wasn't the the kind of the game lineup, which it was a symptom of the thing I'm getting at. It was the fact that they consolidated their developers into one unified platform, which plays into those other things that I was saying. Like, the form factor is like you can play it on the go, or you can play it on the TV. And the big problem with the Wii U and 3DS era was that they had to split their developers, right? Like, okay, well, Intelligent Systems is making a new Fire Emblem game. Okay, it's coming to 3DS. What do we have for the Wii U? Not a whole lot. Okay, so all right, well, now this, the next Mario Party game's coming out on Wii U. All right, well, 3D. I only own a 3DS. Like, what am I supposed to do with that? So now it's like you buy one system and you get. I mean, it's not going to be twice the output, because a lot of these developers are, having to make games for a home console with HD visuals as opposed to like a like 480p or whatever it is, or visuals on the 3DS. So there is a more time intensive and like higher budgets and everything for that type of stuff. But like, in theory, you are getting twice the output, and we've seen it reflected in the library. So
most part it's been good. I do think there's been some growing pains in some franchises of making that leap to a home console, but it's just growing pains. Yeah, Pokemon, Mario and Luigi. Yeah, there's been some struggles.
Yeah, Pokemon.
Mario and Luigi not great.
Yeah,
I've heard a lot of people loved it, actually, and that anybody who doesn't is, should
hates
be
Nintendo. Yeah, they hate Nintendo. Yeah.
I'll say they should be fired, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot the last 2 weeks of my life. Yeah. Okay, Brian, what's your number 2?
I'll stop telling you that.
Number 2 for me is N64 and Game Boy Color. That was really so many fond memories that I have with the Nintendo 64. Like, having friends over, doing sleepovers. We would stay up until the sun came up playing GoldenEye and Star Fox 64, Mario Party, the original Mario Party games, Mario Kart 64. Not to mention, like, this was when all of those franchises came to the 3D realm, and like Mario 64 pretty much defined what a 3D platformer was, and then Ocarina of Time defined what every other 3D game was, and all the other developers were basically chasing what those two games did, depending on what genre they were making a game in. And Ocarina of Time defined so many conventions that action games are still following today. Z targeting is just like what you do when you play Elden Ring and you click like on the stick to lock onto your enemy. That's Z targeting, and that was introduced through Ocarina of Time. And then, so many great franchises. Like I said, like the 3D Mario, 3D Zelda were introduced during this era. And then, like, genre-defining games and franchises were introduced during this era too. Mario Party, I said already. But, like, then look over at Game Boy Color, and, like, this was like tail end of Game Boy, beginning of Game Boy Color, but Pokemon. Pokemon got its start during, like, kind of the N64 tail end of Game Boy, starting of Game Boy Color era, and that's a large reason for why I'm still a gamer today, is a lot of the games that came out during that era.
I love that pick. Yeah. Are you getting an analog 3D?
I don't think so. I still have an operational N64 connected to my TV. I haven't bought a single analog. Nice. Yeah, I have not bought a single analog machine, even though I'm not even a big handheld guy, like, truth be told. But I almost got the analog pocket because that thing it's just a work of art. That thing is like so beautiful, and I really just wanted to bring Pokemon Leaf Green around with me everywhere I go with that beautiful display that they have on that thing. But I resisted. But the analog 3D is very, very cool.
I think I know what your number one is.
Do you?
Well, let's hear it.
Super Nintendo and Game Boy.
Let's go.
That was my first console I ever owned, was an SNES. I played the crap out of NES, but I never really owned one. I would borrow my dad's friend's NES when he would come over. He would like come over and just like hang out for a weekend, and I would just steal it from him basically and play it the entire time. But the SNES really established me as like a gamer. I still remember when I woke up on Christmas morning, probably it was either 91 or 92, and I had an SNES under the tree or it wasn't even under the tree. It was like, if you ever seen the Christmas Story where he wants the Red Ryder BB gun and they go, "Oh, that's all the presents. Oh, what's that over there?" That's what my parents did to me. They hid it behind the couch, and it was the Mario World bundle. So I played the crap out of that. Mario Kart became like an obsession for me. Mario Paint, and I have like stories for all of these games, right? Like I used a lot of it to bond with my dad because he traveled a lot for work. So I only really saw him Friday, Saturday, and then he would leave Monday morning. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, he would leave Monday morning. So when he would come home, we would play Mario World 2-player. We would play Mario Kart. We would play Donkey Kong Country when that finally came out. So those are all games. Speaking of which, shout out 30th anniversary of Donkey Kong Country was this week. So, it has a very special place in my heart for that. And I got Mario Paint because I fell while I was playing and I had to get stitches. And my parents took me to the next day to like Toys R Us to get Mario Paint because that was the game that I wanted. And I love that. I love the Fly Swatter game on that.
As soon as you mentioned, that's what I was thinking of.
I thought you were going to say it's because you like were in a cast, so you could only play with one hand. So
only
you
move one hand.
Yeah,
I had to get stitches on my lip. It wasn't anything to do with my arm.
Okay.
But yeah, so and then Game Boy. I never had an original game. I guess I had a Game Boy Pocket. Or no, I had a Game Boy Color. Never mind, I didn't have a Game Boy Pocket. I had a Game Boy Color. But I played all the OG Game Boy games like Tetris and Pokemon Blue is what I got with my Game Boy Color. So yeah, it was a fantastic era for gaming, and that is I think maybe it's just because I'm in my late 30s and this is like the era that I I grew up in. But I also think that SNES games of all like the classic Nintendo consoles, those games have aged the best. Like I can still go play Super Mario World or Yoshi's Island or maybe not like Star Fox 1 or Super Mario Kart, but like Donkey Kong Country is still great today. And you can't say that about a lot of like those fledgling like 3D era games. Like, you know, they just haven't aged. Like you can play Mario 64 and it's still a lot of fun, but you can also be like, oh yeah, we've come a long way with this. Whereas I still think that Super Mario World is the best platformer of all time.
Yeah, I played Super Metroid this year and was just blown away by how well it holds up.
Yeah, Metroid.
Perfect.
Super Nintendo's Justin's favorite era too.
Oh yeah, very much so.
Awesome.
Yeah. Awesome list, Brian. Thanks for sharing.
And I think a lot of what makes that era so special too is like they're like people kind of worked within the confines of these certain limitations, and they had to develop mastery within those confines. And there's something to be said for like having to be creative with limitations. And as much as like the 3D generation opened so much stuff up, there's also an element of us as gamers where like where there were gaps, we would fill them in with our own imagination. And like nothing that a developer, like no voice that they're going to cast is going to sound better than your imagination for what a character's voice sounds like. And I think the Super Nintendo was that perfect. It was like that right. It was that perfect piece where it lined up where the tech was good and looked amazing, but left room for you to fill in those gaps and put confines where developers had to get really smart and really creative and do really cool stuff. And I think we benefited as gamers from that a lot.
And don't forget that this was also the era that Sega was really starting to push Nintendo, and that pushed Nintendo to like innovate and take risks and develop stuff like Donkey Kong Country, right? Like get Rare to create this weird take on one of Nintendo's first icons of gaming, and that was really awesome. But yeah, I think that the SNES era is amazing, and like I said, the N64 era is my second favorite. So it's not like I'm like screw 3D games. Like I think that you know, both of those are fantastic eras. All of these are fantastic eras.
You were missing the Wii era, which is fine by me. That's my least favorite one. I
had a lot of fun with the Wii. But eventually it got to the point where I was like, I just want to like play like a standard game, right? I don't want to have to like stand up in front of my TV and like waggle my arms back and forth to play like the new Zelda game. I was so excited when they were like, yeah, we support motion controls with the Wii U, but it's not going to be like a motion control system anymore. Yes. I was so excited for that. And like, yeah, we got plenty of shovelware and stuff that was just like this. The entire purpose of this is you touch the screen. But yeah, I think that I'm glad that the Switch has taken the direction it has. We'll just say that.
Speaking of touchscreen controls, we have a question about that. Do you guys both have about 10 more minutes to get to our questions before we get out of here?
Sure.
Okay, let's do it. Let's hit EGAD's emails. You can always email the show, toadstoolboardroom@gmail.com, or drop it in the EGAD's emails section of our community Discord, which there's a link to in every episode. This one comes from Dwayne, who says, I enjoyed the honest discussion on Echoes of Wisdom. Yeah, if you missed last week, Shriver went on an all-time boardroom rant about the direction of the Zelda series and why he feels left behind. So it's worth checking that out. And Dwayne says, it's a great idea to revisit games like this a little bit after the hype bubble. Did the board members enjoy playing Spirit Tracks? Just curious how it landed for you. I'll go first on this one. No, I don't really like the touchscreen Zelda games. It is a time where I can visibly remember exactly what Brian was just talking about when Nintendo announced A Link Between Worlds and said, we're going back to button controls. And I was so excited. We're going back to I hit B and Link swings the sword. And there's some clever stuff in Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks for sure, and some well-designed dungeons and things in there. And I like the use of Zelda in the story and the gameplay of Spirit Tracks. It's cool, but I just don't like entirely touch control action adventure games like that. I like WarioWare with a touch screen, or certain things really work with a touch screen, but an entire Zelda game like that, just not for me. How about you, Justin?
I didn't play it. I think we've talked about this. I'm not a huge handheld gamer. I almost said mobile again, which would get me screamed at once again. I'm not a big handheld gamer for various reasons, both taste and economics over the course of my life. So I haven't, but I do think that this touches on a really good point, which is that there's this like critical curve that things go through, right? Where like things will come out, and sometimes it's tough to actually know how good something is right at the front end. Like as critics, we do our best to be as dispassionate as we can and contextualize things as much as we can. But we're all human beings, right? And so it just as much as anybody else, like it can be useful to look back after a while when that initial hype bubble has subsided and look at like now that we look back on it, like, were we right about this? Were we off about this? At the same time, there's also this other critical curve that always happens where every time something comes out that is good, eventually after 6 months, there's a wave of, well, actually it wasn't good. And eventually it goes back to being good. And if something was bad, eventually there's this wave of, no, actually it was good. And then it goes back to it. So like, it's just this,
Tears of the Kingdom's going through that right now, by the way. That's the game of the moment for that.
Tears of the Kingdom is in that phase of the curve where everybody's like, actually it's not that good. It's going to get back to being like, okay, no, it's a masterpiece. Yes. And so, but like, that's just the nature of the beast. I think that for something like Spirit Tracks, I think we're far enough removed now where we can really take a look at its legacy, what it did in the context of its time, what it's done long term, and how it fits into everything. So like, I don't know, maybe I should go back and play it and give it a fresh look and see where I come out on it. But like, I think that's a really useful thing to do, though, is do those like step back examinations of stuff.
Yeah. Have fun swiping horizontally to slash and vertically to stab. And I think you'll be in and out in about an hour. That's just my guess. Brian, where do you fall on the touchscreen Zeldas?
I remember buying Phantom Hourglass on clearance at a Sears one time. I was just like randomly at a Sears and they had Phantom Hourglass on clearance. And I picked it up and I put it in my DS and played about 30 minutes of it, and I said, I'm never playing this game again. And then when Spirit Tracks came out, I didn't even like think about buying it. So I've watched like all the lore videos and everything, and I'm like, all right, it's cool that like, they're basically like Phantom Hourglass is trying to like, find a new Hyrule after the events of Wind Waker, and like Spirit Tracks is about like connecting the world through like these tracks and everything. It's really the first Strand type game.
I was about to say that, you son of a.
But yeah, I mean, I never really played it, and I don't know that I have any plans to.
Yeah, especially with how hard those are going to be to bring back. They did it on a Wii U Virtual Console, but yeah, that wasn't. I didn't ever download them there and try them there either.
Now, what do you think about, like, how Nintendo has done these classic controllers? Like, you can buy, like, the N64 controller that's compatible with your Switch. What if they did a DS-style, like, form factor that has just one touch screen that you can do, and it just works with, like, DS and 3DS Virtual Console, or the Switch Online things? I have basically been racking my brain for how the Switch 2 could add, like, DS and 3DS games to Switch Online. Because then you have like pretty much the entire Nintendo library. If they add that in GameCube, like they have the entire Nintendo history on Switch. And it's like, oh man, that's a big hurdle to try to figure that out. And if they could figure that out, I think that's the way to go, right? It's like put out a proprietary, like this feels like a DS or a 3DS in your hand, has a touchscreen, and then, you maybe it's even like a 3DS without the top, like the clamshell, because then it just feels like a controller with a touchscreen in the middle of it that's in the shape and weight of a 3DS, and then your big screen, your main screen, is your TV.
Almost like a gamepad in your hands. With
basically, yes.
All but like, roads lead back to the Wii U.
There's a reason that they could put it on Wii U and not Switch. Yeah. So, I mean, there's got to be some way that they can figure that out. But then it's the question comes like, all right, well, then do you, like, when you take your Switch on the go, do you, like, attach it to the bottom of it or something? Like, is that how that works? Because they're not going to put out a peripheral that doesn't work in both handheld and TV mode, I feel.
I think we actually have a few listeners who have this exact same theory about a second screen that they sell as this Nintendo Switch Online thing, like where you can buy your N64 controllers and then you slap it onto your Switch, and I just can't see it. I wish I could because it sounds awesome, but I don't know. It seems like it's creating a solution to something that so few people are actually going to use. So few people are actually going to buy that and play a 3DS game on a Switch 2. So I don't know if I see them going through all that R&D to create this second screen device specifically for backwards compatible stuff as much as I'd love to see it, but I think the solution might just be turn it sideways, and it kind of works. Like, just turn a Switch sideways, put a black bar in the middle where the screen divide should be, and go from there. But that's not that exciting of a solution either. We got one more question here, and then we will get out of here. And this is a fun return. This one comes from not a robot. Okay, so you are a robot?
So,
okay.
robot?
Who says, I am listening to old episodes, and on number 33, you discussed best pairing of 2D and 3D games on Switch among Zelda, Metroid, and Mario. How do Tears of the Kingdom, Mario Wonder, and Echoes of Wisdom impact your feelings? And do you think Metroid Prime 4 will affect your ranking? Yeah, this was a long time ago. I don't even know if Justin was here
before my
yet.
time.
Yeah, this is back when Odell was still our third chairman of the board. And so the games at the time were Breath of the Wild and Link's Awakening, Mario Odyssey and Mario U Deluxe, and Metroid Dread and Metroid Prime Remastered. So those were your sets that we were comparing. And now we've gotten a bunch of new additions to these. So what's the best pairing of a 2D Mario, 3D Mario, 2D Zelda, 3D, and Metroid? What's your best pair of those three franchises? Original games in the Switch library. Brian, what do you think?
I think I'm going to go with Breath of the Wild and Echoes of Wisdom. Or not Echoes of Wisdom, I'm sorry, Link's Awakening.
Okay.
Just because Breath of the Wild is carrying that pretty much, but Link's Awakening is also very good.
Mm-hmm.
Mario Odyssey and Mario Wonder is definitely a stronger pairing than New Super Mario Bros. U. But I think Breath of the Wild, I love that game so much that I think it does, like, it carries it to number one, even if Link's Awakening maybe isn't as good as either Mario Odyssey or Mario Wonder in my book. But yeah, I think that's my pick.
Yeah, it does a lot of lifting. Justin, I'm assuming you're in the same boat.
You know what my answer is going to be. It's going to be the pairing that has the best game ever made in Breath of the Wild. And if you like Tears better, fine, whatever. Yeah, pretty much take any of the 2D Zelda options, and you're doing just fine. I don't think this is... I think this is a really cool question dating back to a very, very old show. I also think it's one that's pretty easy to answer.
Yeah, for me, it's gotten a little more complicated because if I'm thinking of the pairing itself, if I'm approaching this question if I can only play one pair of these games, then I'm picking Tears of the Kingdom and Link's Awakening or Echoes of Wisdom. I don't know. I feel very similarly about them. But I'm still picking that because Tears of the Kingdom is my favorite game of all time. So that's the one I'm rolling with. But if I'm thinking about the strongest pair of original games on Switch, we don't know about Prime 4 yet. So we may have to revisit this a third time once that game is out. So Dread and Prime Remastered, I'll write off for now. But Odyssey and Wonder, that is such a strong set of games. I'm higher on Wonder than I think a lot of people are. It's my favorite 2D Mario. I adore that game. And Odyssey is my favorite 3D Mario. And yeah, Justin's shaking his head. Not a Mario Wonder guy. But I just love them so much. I think it's a great set.
Wonder's my favorite 2D Mario since Mario World, I think.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, easily. It runs circles around New Super Mario Brothers.
And if Logan had given that qualifier, I wouldn't have shaken my head. But when you say it's the best 2D Mario when World and 3 exist, boy, I
didn't say it's the best. I said it's my favorite. There's a difference.
I suppose.
Yeah. I love the Wonder effects. I love the art style so much. That is just, it's one of my favorite ways that the Mario universe has ever looked in Mario Wonder. I just adore everything that they did with it. So I might take Odyssey and Wonder as the strongest set of original games just because I think Echoes of Wisdom's kind of weak. I think it's a little bit weak. So, but I'm still picking Zelda because Tears of the Kingdom is Tears of the Kingdom. But that is going to bring us to the end of our show. That is another episode of the Toadstool Boardroom in the Books. We're a weekly Nintendo show here on Thursday mornings on YouTube for the video version, audio on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or whatever audio service that you like to use. I want to shout out this week on Nintendo Music, F-Zero X, great soundtrack. If you want some adrenaline in your workday, you should boot up Nintendo Music and listen to the F-Zero X soundtrack because it rules. Brian, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people find you and all your content?
Thanks so much for having me. So you can find me on any podcast platform, all things Nintendo. I'm also on YouTube. There's a video version. Just either search all things Nintendo. The better way probably is to find me at Brian P. Shea. And I also have a Patreon, which you can find either by searching Brian Shea Podcasts or All Things Nintendo.
Awesome. And yeah, you're on Blue Sky right now, which a lot of us are starting to use more.
Yeah, Blue Sky at Brian P. Shea. That's pretty much the go-to name for me on most platforms. So if you're looking for me on Blue Sky or Threads, my Twitter is still open for now, but that's only for promotional use. So like I'm not like posting any other stuff on there really. I'm gonna try and deactivate it by the end of the year anyway. So follow me on Blue Sky. Blue Sky.
Cool. Thanks for coming by. We hope to have you in the boardroom again very soon. Justin, where can people find you?
Find me also on Blue Sky. Just look for my last name, Korais. Let's be honest, nobody else in the world has that name, so I'm pretty easy to track down. I don't really use the other social medias anymore either. I did just submit copy today for an interview I'm really excited about for a creator who's done a lot of very, very cool stuff on Nintendo platforms. So I don't know what the exact publish date is on that one, but I'll probably talk about it a little bit on this show as that does come out, because it's a pretty cool one and he had some cool insights. So I know it's vague, I know it's mysterious. Sorry, that's where we're at right now. Other than that, you can find me on the battlefields of Halo, which I've been really into again lately, which we've talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on Blue Sky and X for now, but who knows for how long, at Logan J. Plant. The J is important. There was an imposter running around this week that was using my entire profile with a different name, but that's at Logan J. Plant. Find the show at Toadstool BR on Twitter, and at Blue Sky, it's at Toadstool Boardroom, and send us an email, toadstoolboardroom@gmail.com. But for now, that's all the time I got. I got to get back to playing Animal Crossing New Leaf on my Nintendo 3DS. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great week, and we'll catch you next time right here in the Toadstool Boardroom.